Good afternoon. This is Jeff Dawson from a very cold and dead bit snowy Dallas, Texas. We're not used to this type of weather, so yeah, we'll bitch, whine, and moan about it, but what the hell? We haven't had a blast like this since 83, 84. But by the radar, despite what the weather people keep saying, that it's just going to be this, they probably missed it again. But weathermen are like sport. They can be wrong 95% of the time, and they're still employed. Must be a hell of a gig. Okay. I'm going to talk about, since it is Valentine's Day, what it means to me. Now, I'm not in a relationship right now. These things happen. But back in 2009, I reunited with my high school sweetheart. This is her picture. That's Debbie Beck. We dated a year and a half in college, and everything was great. I was a year older. I went to college, and we had a horrendous breakup. I'm sure those of us that can remember that far back, you had that first really good true love and didn't think anything would go wrong. And then the bottom fell out and you just couldn't stand that person. My God, how could they rip your heart out? Well, despite that, I never forgot about her. Never. And about once every 10 years, I would drop off a business card in her parents' mailbox. No response. Well, in December of 2008, my youngest son, Sean, had a Muay Thai competition in Tulsa. And naturally, I'm going up to watch this. He's badass. He still practices, but he's not competing. But this was a big meet. I went up, watched him compete, but also knew I was going to have to do one other thing. And that was try and get in touch with Debbie one more time. Since we're a year apart, we obviously didn't go to each other's high school reunions. And it took me about 30 minutes. I called my son and asked him what I should do. And he basically said, well, I guess you got to shit or get off the pot, Dad. It's one of the two. You really don't have a choice. Either do it or don't. What else is there? What great wisdom from my son. So I did. I didn't know if her parents still lived there or not. And this is 30 years later, so they're getting up in their years. And 2 weeks pass. Nothing. No phone call. No email. It's like, okay, I can finally let her go. I'm sitting in my office with the text, and this voice goes, Jeff, it's Debbie. And I'm thinking, who's Debbie? And I'm going through the Rolodex in my mind on who this could possibly be. Nothing really needed immediately to keep the jobs moving forward. And then the voice said, very succinctly, Jeff, this is Debbie. And the call I've been waiting for 30 years to take. And that launched us into our second relationship. It was a great reunion. There was one problem. Debbie was on the tail end of breast cancer, and she was wrapping up radiation treatment. She gave me every reason not to come see her, and she only lived 2.5 hours away in McAlester, Oklahoma. And when I found that out, it's just like, my God, how many times have I driven past McAlester and didn't know? But I had asked, well, finally had a word. And she told me everything that was wrong, that she had cancer and she was divorced and she had children and she'd lost her hair. And I basically didn't give two shits about any of that. All I cared about was, I've waited 30 years. Let's see if there's anything still there. And there was. That relationship would last 7 wonderful months until July 20th of 2009, when her breast cancer would take her life. After she had passed, I asked her daughters what they thought about me writing a book about their mom and mine's relationship over the years, and they thought it was a great idea. Okay. And this is what I came up with. It's called Love's True Second Chance. We did pack a lifetime of love in 7 short months, and I would do it again in a heartbeat, even knowing how it was going to end. But when I think of Valentine's Day, I go back and think of what really drew Debbie and me together for all those years. You know, why, of all the girls that I dated, why was she the one that never went away? When I was married, I came home from work one day and my wife told me that I needed to get rid of this box that was in our closet. It's not out in view. Nobody knows it's in there but us. Okay. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? And she showed me the box. Well, up till then, my wife had pretty well given away everything that I had because she needed the space. Okay, fine. No big deal. When I realized what box she was talking about, I looked at her and I said, let's get one thing perfectly straight. When we first got together, you told me that your dog came before me and that if anybody was going to leave the house, it would be me because you had the dog first. And I said, remember when you told me that? And she kind of, I said, same goes for that box. Those are my memories. Get your little boyfriend up in Hayes, Kansas, and danced with him. And I knew all the stories about them. I didn't care. Hell, we're married. What's the big deal? Because I remember he walked up and said, can I dance with Sharon? And I said, well, yeah. It's not like she's going home with you. She's going home with me, right? Yeah, it's pretty simple. Correct. Okay. But yeah, that kind of caused a problem. And I kept that box because it was just a great memory. And when my wife and I split, first thing I did was I took the senior picture Debbie and I took together and put it on the chest of drawers. And my daughter walked in and she didn't bat an eye and goes, is that Debbie? And I said, yes, it is. She said, okay. But we did have a wonderful 7 months. But in this book, there's one chapter that I was really proud of. And it's chapter 14 entitled, Please Leave the Light On, which I'm going to read. It's not long, but it pretty well hits the point. As I said, Debbie had a mastectomy. And Debbie you saw her picture, she's very attractive. She had a nice body in high school. She had a nice body in her late 40s. But yeah, that was part of the attraction. But that wasn't the main event. And when I wrote this chapter, and guys, this is for you too. If you're just in love with the gal for her physical attributes, and the same thing goes for gals, y'all really need to think twice and reevaluate your relationship, because we can all lose an appendage. We can be in a horrific car accident and come out disfigured. So is that what you were in love with? The physical appearance, or was it something deeper? For me, it was something deeper, and I think you'll see that when I read this chapter. Please leave the in about 2 months when the urge to sleep with each other was just too much to bear. Would it be like it was in high school? Would it be awkward? Would we remember what to do? But something that hadn't crossed my mind, how would she feel about herself? I knew she'd had a mastectomy in May of 2008. I knew in my heart it didn't matter what her chest would look like without the right breast. I guess to men, it's just an appendage or something to play with, but for a woman, it's a whole different ballgame. And believe you me, it really is. If you've known a gal that is key is something we as men just don't comprehend until we're faced with it. Debbie and I talked about it occasionally, but never in real depth. I always told her it didn't matter. I loved her just the way she was. Yet I remember seeing the apprehension in her eyes and the thoughts of disbelief. Losing a breast in her eyes was, in a way, losing a part of her womanhood. She'd nursed her children with them. She'd provided her body with pleasure from them, and now she only had one. I guess it might be like a man losing the loss of an arm or a leg, but I'm not sure that's a fair comparison. It really isn't. We walked up the stairs hand in hand. She had that wonderful girlish smile on her face, kind of like when we were in high school and my parents were out for the evening. We entered her bedroom and immediately fell on the bed with arms wrapped around each other, kissing long and hard. The anticipation of making love to her again was boiling up deep inside of me. I'm thinking of the pleasures we're both going to share. Our lips are locked hard against each other. Breathing was difficult, but not necessary. I ran my hand over her smooth, warm chest. She cooed at my touch. I could feel her body trembling from my touch, but there was something a little amiss. I could also feel hesitancy in her movements. She wanted to start undressing, but wasn't ready. Our lips parted. I looked into her deep brown eyes and asked if something was wrong. She partly smiled and said, "No, everything's fine." Her answer told me different. I raised myself off her and sat on the edge of the bed. "Debbie, I love you the way you are. Your physical appearance is not who you are, okay?" She said, "Bricks." I got up and walked toward the light switch. "Debbie, would you like for me to turn the light off?" She looked at me. Her brown eyes started to fill with tears. "No, Jeff, please leave the light on." I stood by the switch, gazing into her eyes. It wasn't necessary for us to make love for me to love her. The only thing I wanted was to be around her and love her. She lowered her head and slowly removed her robe, letting it slide onto the bedspread. I walked towards the bed, not taking my eyes off her face. This was a monumental moment for her and for me. I saw the thoughts in her eyes as I walked closer to her. Could he love a woman with only one breast? Would he be disgusted or repulsed from the ugly scar that stretches across my chest? I sat down on the bed and placed my right hand on her leg. She raised her head up, a small tear sliding down her cheek, and looked for a sign of my facial expressions. What is he thinking? No words were needed. I wiped away the tear, kissed her lips, and said, "Debbie, I love you and always have." I looked down at the scar, took a finger, and gently moved it over the incision. I could feel her body trembling. Is he accepting my physical appearance, or is he just being nice, hoping to get laid? I told her again, "Debbie, I love you," applying another kiss. I lowered my head and kissed the area where her right breast had been. She momentarily shuddered. I felt wet drops falling on my neck. I kissed and sucked the right part of her chest in an attempt to let her know it didn't matter. I truly loved her. I felt both of her hands move onto my head and pull me hard against her in an effort to make sure I wasn't pulling away. I wasn't. I was in the arms of the woman I'd pursued for over 30 years, and the loss of a breast wasn't changing my mind. Not today or tomorrow. Nothing would keep us apart again. After a minute or so, her grip loosened, and I raised my head, looking straight into her eyes. I placed my left hand on her chest and said it again. Debbie, I love you. This time she smiled. It started slowly at the corner of her face and grew until all of her teeth were showing. She still had a few tears falling down her cheeks, but this time she spoke. Jeff, I was so worried what you would think, that I am only half a woman and not the girl you remember from high school. I would understand if you were repulsed by the scar. I just didn't know what you would think. She took a quick breath and continued. Jeff, I now know that when you say you love me, you really mean it. And now I can tell you the same without any reservations. Jeff, I love you too and have missed being in your arms. We kissed each other as only true lovers do. No reservations, no second thoughts, no hidden agendas, only deep, passionate, probing kisses. The storm passed. Her reservations were put to ease. I didn't ignore the fact she was minus a breast, but concentrated on the most important issue at hand, loving Debbie for who she was and not for what she'd lost. That sums up our relationship right there. And for anyone in a relationship that isn't sure what direction it's going, it's a question you need to ask. Are you in love with the person, or are you in love with the physical aspect? Because it was the physical aspect. The more I think about my first marriage, which I've only been married once, that's pretty much what that relationship was about. I didn't have this, I was in love with my wife, but I didn't have this deep connection that I did with Debbie. There was just something about her. And in a relationship, that's what you got to look for. It's that intangible. Why do you love this person? What is it about them that just keeps drawing you there? And it was 30 years before we were united. And yes, it only lasted 7 months, but it was a wonderful 7 months. And I asked Debbie one day, why do you think now is the time we got back together? And she had the best answer. It was unfinished business. And the more I thought about that, I agreed with her. And it was also, we got back together. God brought us back together because this was a time when each of us, but I just wanted to share that. You can find the book on Amazon, whether it's an ebook or a printed version that you like. But if you want to see a relationship through the eyes of a man, this is a great book. And it's just not because I wrote it, because it shows what a relation, we still had problems, but that also made the relationship stronger. So I hope for those of you that are in relationships, it is for the right reason and not the wrong, because if it's the wrong, well, time will let you know that this is just not going to work out. But I hope for those of you that are in that relationship that has the intangibles, that you all have a wonderful life together. Because when that person is gone, you will always have the memory, but you will always miss that person. I mean, it's been 12 years since Debbie passed, and not a day goes by that I don't think about her. That to me was a really good relationship. So y'all stay warm. Enjoy your Valentine's Day. and I look forward to doing another video soon.